I was cleaning out his car when I found them. 5 condoms, hidden beneath the driver's seat. My hands froze, but my mind didn't. That discovery lit a fire inside me, and I knew I wasn't going to confront him with words. I was going to wait and let him feel the consequences. It started as an ordinary afternoon, one of those days when nothing feels unusual, the kind of day where you go about small chores without thinking, just moving from one task to the next. The air was still, the sun was leaning low in the sky, and light spilled across the driveway. His car was parked there, the one he drove every day to work. It had been a while since it was cleaned. Empty bottles rolled under the seats, food wrappers tucked in the corners, and old receipts piled up like forgotten notes. I grabbed a bag and decided to clear it out. Nothing more, just a simple chore. I opened the driver's side door, leaned down, and pulled out the crumpled paper cups. The faint smell of fast food filled the air. I stacked the receipts together, noticing dates and times, some early mornings, some late nights. I didn't pay much attention at first. I had done this many times before. I hummed to myself as I reached for the seat pocket, pulling out more scraps and loose coins. Everything's normal, nothing out of place, until my hand reached deeper under the seat. At first, my fingers touched cardboard. I thought maybe it was an old pack of gum or a crushed box of tissues. I slid it out into the light, and then I saw it. It was a small box, brand new, neatly tucked away under the seat, as if it had been placed there on purpose. I turned it in my hands. My breath caught before I even opened it. 5 condoms, unused, waiting. The world outside didn't move. Cars didn't pass. Birds didn't sing. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, rising fast, pounding against my chest. My hands trembled as I held the box. I blinked once, twice, as if it would change what I was seeing, but it didn't. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The sun hit the box, and the shine from the packaging seemed too bright, too sharp. My throat tightened. My stomach felt heavy. I sat back on the seat, staring at it. 1,000 thoughts fought for space in my head, but none of them made sense. I slid the box into my pocket quickly, as if hiding it from the world, as if the neighbors might be watching. I closed the car door softly, not slamming it, not making a sound. My legs carried me back inside, but my mind was somewhere else, stuck in that small space under the seat. Inside the house, nothing looked different. The curtains still swayed with the breeze, the clock still ticked on the wall, but the air felt strange, heavy, filled with something I didn't have words for. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled the box from my pocket, and set it in front of me. It looked small and harmless, but it wasn't. I stared at it for a long time. Minutes passed, maybe hours, I don't know. I thought about asking him right away. I thought about holding the box in his face the second he walked in, demanding answers, forcing the truth out of him. But I didn't. I couldn't. My voice was gone. My questions stayed locked inside me. Instead, I sat there in silence. That night, he came home later than usual. His keys jingled as he dropped them on the counter. He leaned down, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and smiled. "What's for dinner?" he asked. I looked at him. His face was calm, his tone light, as though nothing in the world had changed. He talked about work, about the traffic, about some joke a colleague had made. His words floated across the table, but I barely heard them. I watched his eyes, his hands, the way he moved, searching for a crack, searching for a sign. But he was smooth, too smooth. He chewed his food, laughed at his own story, and carried on as if we were the same couple we had always been. I answered when I had to, nodding, forcing a smile when he looked at me. But inside, I was elsewhere. My mind was back in the car, under the seat, holding that box. When dinner was done, he leaned back in his chair, sighed, and said, "Long day. I'm going to bed." He kissed me again and walked away without noticing how stiff my body felt under his touch. I stayed at the table long after he had gone upstairs. The house grew quiet, the lights dimmed, but I didn't move. The box sat in front of me again, resting on the wood like a question I couldn't answer. The clock ticked louder. Each second stretched, pulling me deeper into thought. I thought about the day we got married. The memory came in clear. The white dress, the sound of laughter echoing through the room, his hand in mine, his voice shaking a little as he spoke his vows. He had promised honesty, love, loyalty. I had believed every word. I could still hear the way he said my name, as though it meant something sacred. I closed my eyes and held on to that memory. But when I opened them again, the box was still there, sitting on the table, breaking that promise with its silent weight. The vows felt far away now, almost like a story told to a child, not meant for the real world. I sat there, trapped between past and present, between the words I had once trusted and the object in front of me. And then, slowly, another thought formed. I didn't need to confront him. Not yet. I didn't need to cry or scream. I didn't need to beg for an explanation that would probably never come. I could wait. The thought felt cold, steady, almost calm. I reached for the cupboard and pulled out a jar. A small jar filled with crushed pepper, the kind we sprinkled over food without a second thought. The flakes caught the kitchen light, glowing red. I opened the box of condoms carefully. My hands no longer shook. I slid one out, held it in my palm, and rubbed the pepper inside. The sharp scent filled the air, stinging my nose. I did the same with the others, one by one, slow, methodical, almost like a ritual. My mind was quiet, my body steady. There was no rush, only certainty. When I was done, I closed the box again, sealed it shut, and placed it back on the table. For a moment, I just looked at it. The jar of pepper sat beside it, its red flakes scattered across the wood like tiny sparks. Then I stood up, walked back to the car, and slid the box under the seat, exactly where I had found it. I closed the door softly, just as I had before. The driveway was silent. The night air was cool. I stood there for a while, staring at the car, breathing slow and deep. Then I turned, walked back inside, and sat down again. And I waited. The box was back under the driver's seat, resting where I had first found it. I knew what was inside now. It no longer looked like a harmless object. It had become something else. Quiet, hidden, carrying a weight only I understood. The night after I slipped it back, I laid in bed beside him. His body was warm, his breathing steady, but my eyes stayed open in the dark. My mind replayed every step I had taken, from the pepper jar to the car door closing. The thoughts circled again and again. Would he find out tonight, tomorrow, or later? Morning came, and he left for work. His footsteps across the driveway sounded the same as always, but to me, each one felt loaded. I watched from the window as he climbed into the car. My chest tightened as he started the engine, unaware of what was waiting under his seat. The day dragged. Hours stretched longer than usual. I found myself glancing at the clock, waiting for evening to arrive, half expecting him to storm through the door with accusations, half expecting silence. But when he came home that night, he was calm. His tie loosened, his bag dropped onto the floor, his smile as ordinary as ever. He asked about dinner, asked if I had checked the mail, asked about small things that didn't matter. His face was smooth, his tone light. I watched him closely. Every glance, every shift in his seat at the table. I studied the way his eyes moved, the way he chewed, the way his hands rested. He was no different from before, or at least he wanted me to think so. And so began the waiting. Days turned into a routine. He woke up, showered, ate breakfast, kissed me on the cheek, and drove off in the same car. I stood at the window most mornings, watching the taillights fade down the street. My mind lingered on the box hidden under his seat, knowing sooner or later he would reach for it. When he returned each night, I scanned him for clues. Did his shirt smell different? Did his hair seem freshly combed? Was his mood lighter or heavier? I picked apart every detail, searching for the truth without words. But on the surface, life carried on. He laughed at television shows, he asked about bills, he complimented my cooking, he made plans for the weekend. He tucked himself into bed, rolled over, and slept. It was as if nothing had changed, as if the box didn't exist. Yet I knew it did, and I waited. There were moments I almost doubted myself. One evening, as he played with the remote, switching channels without care, I caught myself staring at him and wondering, what if I was wrong? What if I misread the whole thing? What if those condoms weren't meant for anyone else at all? The thought struck me hard, as if my mind was fighting against what I had seen. I considered the possibility that they were old, forgotten, tossed there for no reason. I told myself stories in my head, trying to make the truth softer. But then I remembered the way the box had looked, new, untouched, placed neatly. It hadn't been forgotten. It had been hidden. The doubt didn't last long, but it came back in waves. Some nights I convinced myself I misunderstood. Other nights I remembered too clearly to question it. The waiting stretched me thin. Every time he left the house late, I wondered if it was the night. Every time he lingered on his phone, smiling faintly at the screen, my chest grew tight. I felt like I was living in the pause between one breath and the next, trapped in silence, bracing for impact. I didn't follow him. I didn't question him. I didn't search through his messages or call his office. I didn't need to. The box was enough. It was the only truth I needed. Still, the days dragged like endless rehearsals for a moment that hadn't arrived. And then, one night, it came. He returned home later than usual. The clock had passed midnight. I sat in the living room, dim, pretending to read. The sound of his car door shutting outside made me still. The front door opened and he stepped in. His face glistened with sweat, though the night air was cool. He moved quickly, almost restless. His shirt was rumpled, his tie gone, his hair messy, as if he had run his hands through it too many times. "Long night," he muttered, kicking off his shoes. He avoided my eyes, heading straight for the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. His hand shook slightly as he lifted it. I watched from the doorway. My voice stayed silent, but my eyes caught every detail. The way he scratched his arm, the way he shifted his weight uncomfortably, the way he winced as if something burned inside him. He moved around the house without looking at me. He said he was tired. He said he needed a shower. His words were clipped, short, thrown into the air like excuses. I nodded. I didn't stop him. He went upstairs, footsteps heavy, uneven. The bathroom door shut, and the sound of running water filled the house. I sat back on the couch, my book unopened, my mind quiet. The moment I had waited for had come. I didn't need him to confess. I didn't need him to explain. His body carried the truth. His eyes carried it. His restless hands carried it. The box under the seat had done its work. That night, I lay in bed while he tossed and turned beside me. His sleep was broken, his breathing uneven. I lay still, watching the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds he made as he shifted. The waiting was over. The silence I had lived in for days had given me what I needed. And as I closed my eyes, I knew something he didn't. I knew his secret had finally touched him, and I knew my life would never be the same again. The days that followed were heavier than before. The waiting was over, but the silence inside the house grew louder. He didn't speak of where he had been. He didn't explain why he came home restless, sweating, moving like a man with something to hide. He carried on as if nothing had happened. At breakfast, he asked if we needed milk from the store. At dinner, he asked if I had paid the bills. He talked about the weather, about the news, about his job. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed, but it no longer reached me. I watched him. I listened, but I didn't ask questions. Confrontation never came, and neither did confession. One evening, he sat across from me at the table, his fork clinking against the plate. He smiled at something he read on his phone, the glow lighting up his face. I looked at him quietly, and in that moment, I understood that no words would ever come from him. He would never tell me the truth. He would never admit what he had done. He would keep lying until the end, even as the silence between us grew wide enough to swallow the whole house. And strangely, I didn't need to hear it from him anymore. The truth was already here, sitting in the room with us. It was in the way he avoided my eyes, the way he shifted in his seat, the way he laughed a little too quickly when I said something plain. His body spoke what his mouth refused to. That was enough. At night, I would lie awake while he slept beside me. His breaths came uneven, his body twisting under the sheets. I watched the ceiling, the faint shadows shifting as the clock ticked. The silence stretched out like a rope, binding me tighter each day. The truth had no sound, but it was heavy, heavier than his body pressed into the mattress, heavier than the roof above us. I thought about the life we had built. The house around me was full of it. I remembered the day we painted the living room walls. We had picked a soft color, something warm. I was on the ladder, holding a brush, while he steadied it from below. He joked about my shaky hands, and I laughed so hard I almost spilled paint on the floor. I remembered planting flowers in the garden, our knees in the dirt, our fingers brushing as we pressed seeds into the soil, the way he kissed the back of my hand, leaving a smear of earth on my skin. We had laughed then, too, voices mingling with the breeze. I remembered lying on the bare floor of this house when we first moved in, no furniture yet, eating takeout straight from the boxes. He leaned his head against mine, told me we would fill these rooms with memories. Those memories had been real. Those moments had been ours. But now the same rooms felt empty, even with the walls still painted, even with the flowers still blooming outside. The laughter was gone. The warmth had drained away. What was left was silence, cold and heavy. The house that once felt alive now felt like a shell. One night, I sat alone in the living room, the lamp glowing soft beside me. I looked at the pictures on the wall, our wedding photo, the trip we took by the lake, the holiday dinners with family, smiles frozen in frames, proof of a life that no longer existed. The thought settled deep inside me. This marriage had ended long before I found that box under the seat. The pepper was never the ending. It was only the mirror that showed me the truth. I realized I had been holding onto something that was already gone. The shift came quietly, not with anger, not with tears, just a calm clarity. I didn't want answers anymore. I didn't want him to beg. I didn't want to hear his excuses or his reasons. None of it mattered. What mattered was me, my peace, my freedom, my next step. So, I started to pack. I moved through the house at night while he slept upstairs. The zipper of the suitcase whispered against the silence. I folded clothes neatly, stacking them without hurry. I took only what was mine, only what I needed. Every item I placed in the bag felt like a line drawn, a step away from the life I had once believed in. I packed a few photographs too, not of us, but of myself, my family, moments that belonged to me before him, pieces of a life that were still mine. The house around me stood quiet as I moved. The rooms seemed larger, emptier, as if they already knew I was leaving. I paused in the living room one last time. The walls we painted together were the same color, but they felt faded now. I ran my hand along the surface, remembering the brush strokes, the laughter, but the wall was cold under my palm. I looked at the couch where we had once sat, tangled together in front of the television. Now it sat alone, shadows resting across the cushions. The silence of the house pressed in, but it no longer crushed me. Instead, it carried me forward. When the bag was packed, I set it by the door. I didn't leave that night. Not yet. I sat with it, letting the weight of my choice settle inside me. The decision wasn't rushed. It wasn't angry. It was steady, firm, the way closing a door feels after stepping outside. I knew I wasn't walking away from a life. I was walking away from a ghost. The next morning, he came downstairs, yawning, scratching his head, asking about coffee. His eyes glanced at the suitcase by the door. He frowned. "You going somewhere?" he asked, his voice flat, uncertain. I looked at him. For a moment, I thought about telling him the whole story, about the box, the pepper, the nights of waiting, about what I had seen written across his body when he came home restless and sweaty. But I didn't. I only said, "Yes, I am." His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes searched mine, but I gave him nothing more. The silence filled the room again, heavier than his words could ever be. And in that silence, I felt free. I used to think the pepper was the plan. That tiny act of fire was supposed to be the revenge. But as I stood in my living room with a suitcase by the door, I understood something deeper. The pepper wasn't the end. It was only the spark. The real revenge wasn't watching him squirm or stumble. It wasn't waiting for him to trip over his own lies. The real revenge was walking away, silent and steady, leaving him with the life he had chosen. When he saw the suitcase, his first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. His voice cracked as he asked questions, fumbling for answers that didn't exist. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Why now? What happened?" His eyes darted around the room, landing on the photos, the couch, the walls, as if they could speak for me, as if the house itself could explain why I was leaving. I said nothing more. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't tell him about the box under the seat or the nights I had waited for the truth to show itself. I let the silence answer for me. Later, when I stepped outside with my bag, he followed me into the driveway. His words tumbled over each other. "You're making a mistake. You're imagining things. You've misunderstood." That word clung to the air. Misunderstood. I met his eyes, calm and steady. Inside, I repeated it quietly. Understood. 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 Because I did. I understood more than he thought I did. I understood more than he would ever admit. I understood that trust had cracked long before I found that box. I understood that love without loyalty is only a story people tell themselves to sleep better at night. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply lifted my bag into the car and closed the door. The calls began later that night. At first, his voice was sharp, demanding. "Come home. We need to talk. You're overreacting." Then the tone softened, turned into begging. "Please, I didn't mean to hurt you. We can fix this. Just tell me what you want me to say." Finally, the messages grew long, tangled with denial and promises. He swore I had misunderstood. He swore nothing had happened. He swore he loved me. Each time, I let the phone ring. Each time I watched the screen light up, then go dark again. His words no longer held weight. They were just sounds, empty and thin. The silence I kept was louder than anything I could have said. The days that followed felt lighter. My bag sat unpacked in the small cabin I rented by the woods. The air smelled clean, fresh with pine and soil. The nights were quiet, broken only by crickets and the wind brushing against the trees. I sat by the window most mornings, a warm mug of tea in my hands. Sunlight poured across the wooden floor, painting it gold. I breathed deeply, letting the stillness sink into me. The house I left behind was filled with shadows. This place was filled with light. Sometimes memories returned. The painting of walls, the laughter in the garden, the vows spoken under bright lights. They flickered across my mind like old films, but they no longer hurt. They were pieces of a life that once was, not a chain holding me down. I thought of him less with each passing day. His voice grew faint, his face blurred in my memory. What stayed clear was the silence of lies, the silence of nights waiting, the silence of rooms filled with words that meant nothing. Now, silence meant something else. Here, silence meant peace. One evening, I walked outside and looked at the sky. The sun was setting, the horizon painted in soft colors. The air was cool against my skin. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel heavy. I whispered the word again. Understood. Not with bitterness, not with anger, just with clarity. Because I understood my story wasn't about what he did. It was about what I chose. I chose to leave. I chose to protect my peace. I chose freedom over lies. That was the real ending. The pepper had been only a symbol, a sharp spark hidden inside something that looked harmless. It reminded me of what I had lived through, pain tucked into a quiet life. But leaving was more powerful than any spark. Leaving was fire. I don't know what became of him after. Maybe he kept lying. Maybe he found someone else to fool. Maybe he still sits in that house, talking to walls that no longer echo back. But I know where I am. I am here, in a cabin filled with light, with tea warming my hands, with mornings that belong only to me. And that is enough. I found 5 condoms in his car. I rubbed pepper on them and waited. But in the end, the sting wasn't his. It was mine. And walking away was the only cure.